What exactly are liminal spaces? For the past couple of years, we've seen all over the internet, liminal spaces are eerie, empty, physical or virtual spaces that provoke a feeling of uncanny valley. This feeling comes from something being less than right or real that makes us feel wrong and uneasy, like back rooms that are move-in ready for people to use, but there isn't a soul to be found. Overall, in this light, liminal spaces have grown to be somewhere where we shouldn't be at all. But in reality, liminal spaces are much more complex than just a photo of an empty grocery store or an empty classroom. In fact, you might even be in one right now. Anthropologically, sociologically, existentially, metaphysically, whatever it may be, liminal spaces are the most important moments in time for all of us. Be it on a small scale with the phases throughout our lives, or on a large scale with the changes between historical periods and eras. There is always a moment connecting one point in time to another, and these are what we call liminal spaces. With the saying, a fork in the road, the liminal space would be the space between all of the different paths. But in this instance, it would be the space connecting you and your long, comfortable route to your routine, to many different distressing choices. The fork of what to do. And so today I want to ask you to stop and smell the liminal spaces, because these are truly the turning points in our life that create the map of our entire lifetime, our timeline. What forks in the roads do we go down? These are the choices we make. This theory can be dated all the way back to 1909 from the book Rites of Passage by Arnold van Gennep. And if I'm saying Van Gennep incorrectly, I am terribly sorry right now. Van Gennep was a French, German, and Dutch anthropologist who studied social rituals and actually first coined the term rites of passage, which is very commonly used today. From the 1960 edition of the Rites of Passage, a complete scheme of rites of passage theoretically includes preliminal rites, rites of separation, liminal rites, rites of transition, and post-liminal rites, rites of incorporation. Van Gennep's process of separation, transition, and incorporation is not at all unlike Joseph Campbell's hero's journey from his book A Hero of 1,000 Faces, which if you're a fan of this channel, you know I reference literally probably in every video. Joseph Campbell's Hero of 1,000 Faces is known as the ultimate guidebook for writing the deepest and most fulfilled main character for any story. Campbell's 3 stages of the hero's journey mirrors Van Gennep's, with the hero's departure from their ordinary world, their initiation into a new world, and then the hero's return into the ordinary world with something new. And this story can be seen over and over and over again. And so here's some references that Joseph Campbell uses in his Hero of 1,000 Faces. The story of Genesis, Exodus, Jesus, Buddha, Dante's Divine Comedy, Gilgamesh, Hercules, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, and the list goes on. I'm sure he probably lists more than 1,000. But more modernly, we can also look at Batman, Star Wars, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, really any story that has ever left an impression on you, ever. The hero has gone through something. And that in and of itself is the hero's journey. Going through something and changing. That's what usually makes them the hero, is they change. And all of these stories allows us, the reader, the watcher, the listener, whatever it may be, to go through that awkward stage of, adulthood, younghood, whatever it may be, with the character and become more comfortable with the fact that change happens. Because let's be honest, none of us actually want the change. And so to see someone be much more happy with it allows us to be a little bit more happy with it. Just a little bit. On this same topic, Forbes Health actually posted an article recently called Liminal Space, What is it and how does it affect your mental health? And this is probably the biggest question of them all. The writer of the article, Kimberly Dawn Newman, quotes New York-based mindset expert and high-profile transformation coach Kirsten Franklin, who says, liminal spaces are where one thing ends and another is about to begin, but you are not quite there yet. You are in the space between. Basically, your mind likes things to be regular and consistent. It craves and creates predictability. Our caveman brains has tricked us to avoid anything where we don't 100% know the outcome. Luckily, the article does offer a potential solution, but I will admit it is just the most obvious of solutions. There are many different ways you can learn to be in a liminal space with grace. The goal is to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, Franklin says. And the good news is you'll likely find reward on the other side. So just get comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's just obvious. That you can't really do that with a click of a button at all. So it is worth mentioning that the article does point to skilled professionals are always good to have around, and it never hurts to talk to someone because you can't see the picture if you are in it. And this is one of the big things. If you are in the picture, you cannot judge yourself. But I want to state here and right now, if you are in a liminal space, I believe it would be even easier to see the bigger picture because you are completely on the outside of it right now. You aren't in one space or another. But before I get too far ahead of myself, I do want to say that the article starts with this. Feel like you're stuck in limbo? You might actually be in liminal. An asterisk here, I don't know if that's how you use the word, but just let me know if that's the correct usage, But this is the exact type of existential crisis that I focus my work on a lot. If you are in a rut, you gotta get out of it. But at the same time, sometimes you do not even realize you're in a limbo or you are in a rut and you're in a groove and don't even realize that that groove is actually a rut. And so that's why I think it is actually very crucial and very important for all of us to stop and smell the liminal spaces while we have a time to decide. From the future of indeterminacy, datafication, memory, and biopolitics, a group devoted to liminality in the digital age, run by a division of the University of Dundee and the Arts of Humanities Research Council. The word liminality is derived from the Latin limen, which means threshold. Liminality refers to the ambivalence, confusion, or disorientation experienced in the middle stage of a rite of passage, when participants no longer hold their pre-ritual status but have not yet begun the transition to a status they will hold at the end of the rite. Throughout our life, liminal spaces can be seen everywhere, including our preteen era, where we're not quite a kid, but we're not quite a teenager either, or if we're a groom-to-be or a bride-to-be, we're, again, not quite one or the other, or maybe we're a parent-to-be. Or a big one that's probably often overlooked, such as going from elementary school to middle school to high school, and then high school to a college or a university where You might even be going from one state to another or across town. Either way, it's a huge step, but it's not instant at the same time. It almost never is. The liminal space in and of itself is a connecting stage from point A to point B, where we can take a look around and actually point ourselves in the right direction with the fork in the road sort of way. Again, from the future of indeterminacy, during the liminal stage, the participant's identity, their relationship to their environment, family, and more broadly, society, as well as their relationship to time, space, and existence as such, is in flux. In more general terms, liminality refers to a state of flux and in-betweenness in which the dominant and governing logic of a given situation is temporarily suspended. In this stage of flux becomes a stage of disorientation, and following this, I would believe it to be perfectly natural that we also follow it with a stage of disassociation. And to a certain extent, this is exactly why the Forbes article references liminal space to mental health, because we aren't exactly associating ourselves with anything, potentially, maybe, hopefully not. But in a real way, we aren't exactly associated to stage A anymore, but we're not yet exactly associating ourselves to stage B. We're somewhere in this stage, A point B section where we can stop and just look at ourselves in the mirror and look at the big picture and take a moment. And on the whole, this allows us to look at ourselves with less bias and more objectively. Very similar to if you have someone come over to your apartment and you suddenly realize how dirty it is. Whereas if you're just chilling, you may not see it at all. In stopping and smelling these liminal spaces, we can realize maybe something we hadn't before. We can reroute our fork to go one way rather than another. And maybe potentially we can overlook our fear of change and realize maybe something can be better. Was that there a second ago when I was completely comfortable? Or am I suddenly disorientated and everything is anew? But above all, maybe we can recognize that our entire lives maybe are just one big liminal space between birth and death, and so that literally at any moment in time, we can reroute our fork in the road metaphor at any moment. There's nothing actually stopping us from saying, F this, and go and do something happier, and realizing suddenly, boom, oh my gosh, I'm in a rut, I'm not happy, and you move on, and just look elsewhere, and realize that change is better than what is of current. But there is no one point in life that says you have to move towards success. Throughout your entire life, you can move toward more success. There's never a too late. You can always stop and transition yourself from somewhere that's comfortable but not quite making you happy to something totally new and potentially much, much better. And that is really the moral of today's story of stopping and smelling. It's a dangerous business, Frodo, going out your door. You step onto the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you might be swept off to. And so, walk out of that door, keep your feet on the ground, but take a second. What road are you about to walk down? Feel like a cop talking to a little kid. What road you going down, kid? But yeah, that's it. Again, moral of the story, stop and take a second, because here on the Artem Alexander channel, we are ubermensch and can do anything we want at any given moment. Not literally, as I say always, don't break the law, but as my favorite philosopher always says, Friedrich Nietzsche, you can do anything, art is life. But that's what the Ubermensch is all about. Just stop, take a second, realize nothing is real, and you can do anything you ever can want. Yes. So this is just another chapter in that story, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you are all the way here to the end, you are a super duper awesome trooper. I don't know. If you are all the way here to the end of the video, I absolutely adore you, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this. What was your favorite liminal space in your life? Mine would have to be from this fashion sense to the last. It was an awkward transition, but we made it, baby. We made it. No, honestly, if I were to be honest here, my favorite transition would probably be from none of them. They're awful. They're all terribly awkward and awful. And who enjoys confusion and disorientation? Am I right, guys? If anything, my favorite liminal space was when I was deciding majors. But let's be honest, I was deciding what my other major was gonna be. Philosophy was a go-to all the way. So, what was yours? Write it in the comments. I would love to read it. But with that, I will bid you adieu, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend some time here with me. Said that twice, oh well. But yes, thank you. And subscribe if you haven't yet. I never ever say that, I haven't in ages, so no one ever subscribes. Anyways, I love you guys. Have the best night of your life, or morning, or afternoon. There's other times of day too, like dawn. It's dawn right now. No, dawn isn't for 3 more hours. We're solid. Thank you so much for catching, and let me know what you think. Alright, bye. I love you.
4-inch 4K 1080p. You're wasting your time, not making friends. You don't understand, where did they all go? Now what you have to say is stuff I already know. Cause someone flipped himself and is talking you through. So don't feel alone. Baby, come on. Let us back up back and listen to the mountain. I wish I could go back to the 1900s. I wish I could go back to the 1900s. You're barely in your 20s, but you're already bitter, bitter like the fruit they grow in my home. I eat them for dessert, right next to the fire that I lit from my phone. Breathing in toxic fumes that make me come